Okay, now it is the Gunsmith Show, and it's the bottom of the hour. We're looking up. I do want to say thanks to all of our sponsors, Williams Gun Sight, Attorney Tim Cassidy, Zach Goodhart.
And Pal
Alarm. Thank you so much. ICanMarketThat.com, and all the support we get from everybody. It keeps us on the air, and from you, our listeners. The feedback we get during the week is awesome. Thank you so much. We got some great things coming up here in the next months to come of the Gunsmith Show, and looking forward to every one of them. So thanks for being a part of it with us.
Now this week we are talking about the 20 gauge shotgun. Well, it is a 20 gauge shotgun.
It's smaller than a 12 gauge, and that doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
But people
think larger number, larger gun.
Right.
You know, a 50 caliber is larger than it's the opposite.
It's completely opposite. Shotgun world is kind of in a way completely opposite than rifles.
Somewhat.
But we're going to explain to you a little bit here how they got the name 20 gauge.
Okay. Are you sure on this? You've done your Gunsmith Show dedicated research on this. Okay.
From this is what I could find. Shotgun gauges are determined by the number of lead balls of a given diameter required to make 1 pound of that size ball.
Yeah.
Just like nails have penny nails.
Okay.
So 10 lead balls of 10 gauge diameter are required to make 1 pound. So that makes it 10 gauge. But 20 lead balls of 20 gauge diameter make 1 pound. So they take the...
Is this a British thing?
Yes.
This kind of reminds me of BTU.
It's exactly a British thing. Okay. That's what makes it hard for us to understand, I think.
Maybe we should just come up with a brand new designation for it.
I just call it, I don't know.
A little bit awesome.
Why don't we just only narrow it down to 3 shotguns? You got a big, medium, or small. Which one do you want? You got a 12, a 20, or a 410?
I'm sure there's some good shotgun people out there. Matter of fact, if my friend Cliff is listening, maybe he could call and get a very, very clear clarification on that. But our number here in the studio is 743-8255.
Now that tells us how they kind of got the name for a gauge.
Okay.
But it's true diameter. It's a .615 diameter.
That's more American. I like that better.
Muzzle loader.
I like American increments.
And it's actually 3.75 mil. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, thank you.
It's .615 diameter muzzle loader, which is where they were originally began in the American colonies as a muzzle loading shotgun.
Right. It's probably whatever size they had that tube, and they decided to turn it into a shotgun.
Exactly. That lead pipe left over from the Mayflower.
Yeah, there you go.
They turned it into a shotgun.
Floated here.
But anyways, and let me just give you a history kind of the shotgunning thing, I guess. In the 1880s, the 10 gauge rivaled the 12 gauge as an all-around gauge.
Why, sure it would.
And the 8 gauge was popular for waterfowl hunting.
And that I just don't understand that one.
The 16 gauge was the specialized upland hunting gauge for birds and sorts.
That makes sense.
And the 20 gauge was just nothing more than a curiosity.
No kidding.
When the 20th century came around, in 1938, the 8 gauge was outlawed for waterfowl hunting.
Too much lead?
By the Federal
Firearms
Firearms
Act. I wonder if it was
Act.
lead then, or they just decided not to...
I don't know if it was...
Too many people falling overboard trying to save their gun and they drowned?
Probably.
Because the gun weighed as much as a small vehicle?
You'd have to put a life jacket on in the boat.
That is a massive gun. If you've ever seen an 8 gauge, folks, we actually had a real good opportunity to get very close. We didn't actually handle it, but it was Grover Cleveland's side-by-side 8 gauge at the National Firearm.
Grove's gun?
Oh, Uncle Grover had a massive 8 gauge side-by-side.
He had the only known Colt side-by-side 8 gauge shotgun.
Beautiful gun. It's in a display case at the National Firearms Museum in Springfield, Missouri, inside Bass Pro Shops, unfortunately. But anyways, you have... No, it was a beautiful setting. It was a nice place. I was just let down.
Jack O'Connor, the famous author, proponent of the 270, wrote a book in the 1950s about shotgunning world or the art of shotgunning. And he did all these tests about, who shoots what. Well, at the time, in 1953, the 20 gauge had 17% of the market, and it was third. And the next one up was 16, and the top of the line was 12 gauge.
Right.
But in
by then, even 10s and 8s were basically working their way out of the system. There were still some old 10 gauges, but 10 gauges kind of they disappeared for years.
Well, and then in the 1970s, O'Connor did the same exact thing again, kind of an update of the book. And then he found out the 20 gauge basically knocked the 16 gauge right out of the market.
Yep, I believe that.
And it was actually the 20 gauge had become the favorite upland game gun.
Well, I think it's a little more sporting. It's kind of like when you get into, guys get into ultralight fishing. They want to try to catch the biggest fish with the thinnest line.
Yeah.
Well, 20 gauge is a ample gun for hunting upland game birds and small game. And there's no reason to have the recoil and the punishment that a normal sporting gun would give you with a 12 gauge.
Exactly.
20 gauge is very comfortable. It was my first shotgun.
There you go.
Side by side 20 gauge. It was a Krieghoff. No, I'm just kidding. No, we bought it at Kmart. I mean, there was a K.
Oh, it was a K. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Bought it at Kmart, a Boito. Side by side 20 gauge. Boy, that was a great gun. Anyways.
Oh yeah.
It was my little Krieghoff. There you go.
I named it Krieghoff.
Just so you guys know, Krieghoff is a very expensive shotgun.
I can see with your etching tool out there.
Oh yeah, Krieghoff. Yeah, my engraver. Now, early gunsmithing by the gunsmiths. now when Jack O'Connor redid this book, is there any numbers as to what he found at that time? The amount of 20 gauges being sold?
It was upwards of like 35%, I believe. Yeah. That's what I remember saying.
12 gauge is still the king of the hill in the United States.
And it always will be because it's that standard. It's military uses it. Yep. It's always going to be. But the 20 gauge will always be, I think, the consumer favorite over a 12.
Think so?
I think so.
Sweet
because
guns.
It's 12.
Now, there's other gauges we're not talking about, too.
Oh, absolutely.
28s and
16s.
Yeah, and I know a lot of my friends just absolutely love their 16 gauges, and they've got them, and they're beautiful older guns, and there's still. Is there any manufacturer still making 16s that you know of? I think Ithaca still makes a 37 and 16,
and also in.
But I might be wrong there.
I believe there's some side by sides and over and unders that are still made in it.
I bet.
And Browning makes pumps for it. I don't know if Remington does anymore, but...
Well, as it goes, and I'm sure we'll hear about that.
But that's why we're only talking about 20 gauges.
We're talking about 20 gauges. Now, deer hunting.
Yes.
And this kind of... We mentioned 20 gauges, and you got a call from another friend named Jacob.
Yep.
And he started talking about just how accurate and how powerful his 20 gauge deer hunting shotgun is. And we've heard tell of this too. I mean, we had a friend drop a coyote at like 150 yards with a slug from a 20 gauge rifled shotgun.
Yep.
And so we said, okay, yes, you have some long range, possibilities. Now, he explained to you that over in Clayton Township last year, he knocked down a large buck and got it.
Yep.
One shot kill at what yardage?
215 yards.
With a 20 gauge.
With a 20 gauge bolt action slug.
Out of a Savage.
Out of a Savage bolt action. 220.
And I don't doubt it.
Yep.
I don't doubt it at all. Because I'm a firm believer in these rifled barreled shotguns, bolt action, that are designed specifically to shoot sabbated, 20 gauge and 12 gauge shells. They are literal tack drivers. Jacob and I both have them, and they are one-shot whole guns at 100 yards.
Yep.
Hey, we got a caller. Hi, caller. Who's this?
It's BJ.
Hi,
and I
BJ.
just want to say that about 50 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, and giving my age away, that if you were a young person and you wanted to go small game hunting, whether it was pheasants or quail or rabbit or something like that,
sure,
you used a 20-gauge shotgun.
Sure.
And the one that I had was a double-barreled J.C. Higgins from Sears and a Ted Williams model. Everybody connects him with fishing, but no.
There's
I don't know what happened to that shotgun, but it was one of the... It doesn't have a big kick like a 12-gauge or anything like that, yet it's great for small game.
Sure.
And I recommend that for anybody who has a young person in the family who wants to start hunting. Go with the 20 gauge, and then you can work out to whatever else you want.
Exactly.
That double-barreled 20 gauge, I love that. I don't know what happened to it.
I know what happened to mine, and that's what bothers me. Thanks, BJ, for calling. I sold mine kind of on a whim, and I shouldn't have, and now I kick myself in the butt for it. But you always look back. It's like remember we did that show a while back, Jake, about 30 shows ago. Oh, I wished I hadn't sold that
Yep.
gun. And that's one of them. But
Well,
we
we're talking about the deer hunting with a 5/8, deer hunting with a 20 gauge.
sure.
Did you know this is one of those interesting things you find out when you do research for the show? A 20 gauge slug, which
Yes.
we'll be shooting a 5/8 inch slug, 5/8 of an ounce slug out of a 2 3/4 inch shell, has a muzzle velocity of 1,500 feet per second. Now, when that slug hits its target, it is ballistically identical to a .454 Casull hitting its target, and
Now-
it's twice the power of a .44 Magnum hitting its target.
Very interesting.
How interesting is that?
Now, on that note, there are 20 gauge slugs that far outperform that at this point.
Exactly.
Far out that'll go 2,000 feet per second. So just imagine that.
Now,
Now you're talking like 444 ballistics.
yeah.
So pretty tremendous.
And you know how 20 gauges always have yellow shells.
Yes.
The casings are always yellow.
Tell them why.
Well, there is a reason, and it's a federally mandated reason. This is the only cartridge that is federally mandated for color to be yellow, because they know the 20 gauge will fit into a 12. It'll drop right into the hole, and you could rack it in there, and you had no idea until something bad could happen.
Right. Nobody wants that to happen.
Nobody wants that to happen. So that it was made yellow so that it stood out from any of the other rounds, so that it could be seen
Well,
in the
interesting.
pile. Look at 12 gauges are predominantly red or black
Or green.
or green. Yeah, you're right,
yep.
or green.
Remingtons.
But look at Remington 20 gauges, yellow. Winchester 20 gauges, not red, yellow.
I like that, how you're predominantly red, so you're thinking about the Winchester AA.
Well, we've never, I don't know if, I'm sure Remington has a target load.
They have greens and blacks in
Yeah,
Remington.
and we've always just shot AA's out of our shotguns.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, there's a ton of ammo out there available from everything from buckshot to 9-shot, which buckshot is a series of BBs. They're large BBs, though. They are
Almost, yeah.
they're like 26 caliber BBs in buckshot for 20 gauges.
Yes.
Okay. To number 9-shot, which is finely ground, almost like coffee grounds. It's so fine, made for skeet shooting, very close up, so that you get a lot of BBs out there when you're shooting skeet at when it's 8 yards in front of you.
Right.
So
And the slugs. Hornady
Yeah.
makes a slug.
everybody.
Federal,
There's so
Federal
many different
makes some
slugs.
slug. And
This whole started years ago when Brennecke came out with a super slug they made, and it started to change the way we started thinking about shotguns. And instead of just having the old big sluggers, the big lead slugs, it began to become more specialized. And over the past 30 years, it's come to the point now where I never thought I'd take a shotgun and put 5 shots into the same hole at 100 yards. And now I know it's a reality. Where I just, with a smooth bore and with the old style slugs, you'd hope to hit the deer-sized target at 100 yards.
Right.
You say, yeah, it'll hit there. You gotta practice. You gotta do what you gotta do.
it's like
Now with scopes,
it was almost the same as muzzle loading.
your friend Jacob, hats off to him for giving us
Oh,
that
yeah.
story about
Yeah.
dropping that buck at 215 yards, and I don't doubt it a bit.
Nope.
It's still hitting with plenty of power, much more than a bow would hit with at that range.
Imagine the arc you have to do for a bow at 215
Nope,
yards.
but Ted Nugent will be able to tell us. So it's a very interesting story, and 50 years ago, like BJ said, is really no different than now. There's a lot of kids learning how to shoot with 20 gauges,
Yep.
and there's a lot of adults that greatly appreciate the light recoil and the fun that a 20 gauge can bring you. So
Yep.
if you don't have one, get out and get one. Shells are available.
They are.
Today, everywhere.
They
You could
are.
probably go to Walmart and buy them if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just got to think against Walmart. It's not about their employees. It's about the amount of things in their store made in China. That's all it is. Everybody says, oh, they're human rights, blah, blah, blah. It's always been a great place to buy cheap ammo and stuff like that, because I head there and I go straight for the sporting goods department. But
You know how Meijer puts the pharmacy in the far back? Walmart puts sporting goods in the far back just for you.
I got to walk past the junk I don't need to get to the stuff I want. But
Ooh.
that's the whole thought process.
Ooh, a printer for $10. I don't need a printer. I'm here for ammo.
They should put a coffee shop back there so I can go back there and buy a coffee at the same time.
All right.
We got to go to commercial break. Hang on tight. You're going to hear a couple of nice commercials, and then we'll be back on the air. So hang on tight.